Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Fast Times News for another deep dive, where we take those really complex topics and break them down into, insights that are actually digestible.
Yeah, bite size.
Exactly,
Yeah,
bite-sized. Thank you
wow.
for that. And today, we are tackling something that have the potential to really shake up the global economy. I'm talking about Donald Trump's very surprising return to tariffs.
Yeah, it's definitely making some waves, and there are a lot of strong opinions flying around out there about this one.
You're telling me, and we've got a whole stack of news articles and analyses here, and they're all offering different perspectives on Trump's proposed tariffs on Mexico and Canada and China. And what I find really fascinating is that he's not just proposing a little tweak here, a little tweak there. We're talking about a potential 25% tariff on everything coming from Mexico and Canada,
Wow.
on top of potentially adding another 10% tariff on goods from China.
And that's on top of, the tariffs that are already in place. So we're not just talking about a trade tactic here. This could be a complete reshaping of global trade as we know it.
Okay, so let's unpack this a little bit on the surface. Trump's goal, his stated goal, is to curb illegal immigration and drug trafficking, particularly fentanyl. He's saying that Mexico and Canada aren't doing enough to stop the flow.
Right, but when you look at it more closely, his argument really seems to kind of clash with the data.
How so?
Well, for example, when it comes to immigration, Trump is claiming there's this crisis at the border under Biden, but the numbers actually show a decrease in border crossings compared to his own administration.
Huh.
And then on the fentanyl issue, it's interesting because over 86% of those convicted of fentanyl trafficking in the U.S. are American citizens.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so that suggests that the source of the problem might be a little bit more internal than Trump is letting on.
Okay, so that's a really good point. So if the data is contradicting his claims, what's really driving the super aggressive push for tariffs?
Well, one possibility is that this is really a form of diplomatic pressure. Trump's America First policy has always put, American interest first, even if it means kind of ruffling some feathers on the global stage.
Right.
So he might be using these tariffs as leverage to kind of force Mexico and Canada to cooperate on his terms, regardless of what the data says.
So it's less about economics and more about just strong arming them into compliance.
It's possible, but the big question is, could this backfire by pushing our allies away with these tariffs? Is he risking isolating the U.S. on the world stage? Because this approach definitely diverges from traditional trade policy.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the potential fallout for American consumers.
Yeah.
I mean, research from ING suggests we could be looking at price hikes of up to $2,400 per year for the average American.
Per year.
Per year. And we saw this happen before with his previous tariffs. Washing machine prices went up by 12%.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not just those big ticket items either. We're talking about, everyday things, the stuff you grab at the grocery store or order online. All those things could become significantly more expensive.
Yeah.
Imagine paying, a premium for your morning avocado toast because avocados from Mexico are suddenly hit with a 25% tariff.
Ouch. Yeah, that's going to hit close to home for a lot of people. But it's not just avocados, right?
Oh, definitely not. We're talking strawberries, tequila, and believe it or not, even piglets.
With piglets.
Piglets, yeah. Canada is a major exporter of piglets to the U.S., and they could become collateral damage in this trade war.
I never would have thought of that. But,
Yeah.
That raises a bigger question. What about the farmers that rely on those exports? What about American industries that depend on imports from these countries?
Mhm.
They could be hit hard, too.
Absolutely. And we haven't even touched on the potential global backlash yet. I mean, China has already issued a warning about mutual losses from a trade war, and the European Union is getting ready for retaliatory tariffs. They're looking at iconic American products like Harley-Davidson's and Levi's jeans. So this could really snowball into a global trade war with consequences we can't even begin to predict.
Okay, so we've got rising prices, potential hardship for businesses, the threat of global retaliation. Where do we even go from here?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? To really understand this, we need to dig into the history of trade wars. We need to look at past examples like the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act and learn from the successes and the failures. And we also need to consider the broader impact on the global economy, things like, increased uncertainty and volatility in the markets and the erosion of trust between nations. We'll get into all of that in the next part of our deep dive.
And you won't want to miss it, but before we go, I want to hear from you. What stands out to you about this whole tariff situation? Is this, some strategic power play, or is this a reckless gamble with the global economy? Let us know in the comments below, and make sure to like and share this video with anyone who needs a crash course on this complex issue.
We'll be back soon to, explore those historical parallels and the broader economic implications, so stay tuned.
And don't forget to subscribe to the Fast Times News for even more deep dives into the news that shapes our world.
You got it. Welcome back to the Fast Times News Deep Dive. So, as promised, we're going to take a little trip back in time to, examine how tariffs have played out in history.
Yeah, because believe it or not, this isn't the first time that, a leader has wielded tariffs as a weapon.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So give us like a crash course in Trade Wars 101. What are some of the most notable examples and what can we learn from them?
Well, one of the most infamous examples and one that, still sends shivers down the spines of economists is the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930.
Oh yeah, that one's often blamed for making the Great Depression even worse, right?
Exactly. Yeah, this act slapped these hefty tariffs on thousands of imported goods.
Wow.
Now, the intention was to, protect American businesses, but the ripple effect was just disastrous.
What happened?
Well, other countries, they retaliated with their own tariffs, and pretty soon global trade just ground to a halt.
So what was the fallout from that?
Well, it was just this cascade of negative consequences. Global trade plummeted, unemployment soared, and, it deepened the economic crisis that was already, gripping the world.
Right.
So the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act really serves as this stark reminder of how protectionist policies can totally backfire and ultimately harm everyone involved.
So that's a cautionary tale for sure. But have there been times, when tariffs have actually worked?
Yeah, there have been instances where tariffs have been used more strategically, like as a bargaining chip during trade negotiations.
Okay.
Sometimes just the threat of, imposing tariffs can be enough to get countries to, come to the negotiating table and make some concessions.
So it's kind of like a high-stakes game of chicken.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Each side trying to, outmaneuver the other.
So there is a chance it could work, but it's definitely a gamble.
Precisely. And, that's what makes Trump's current approach so fascinating, but also quite concerning. The scale of these proposed tariffs, targeting all goods from Mexico and Canada is really unprecedented in recent times. And the fact that he's using them to try and influence these non-economic issues like immigration and drug trafficking, well, that's a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, it's like he's playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers.
Right. Yeah.
And it raises the question, what is the end game here? Is he truly prepared to walk away from, decades of established trade relationships and risk a full-blown trade war? Because if history has taught us anything,
Yeah.
it's that nobody wins in a trade war.
Exactly. And it's not just the direct economic consequences we need to consider either. Think about those ripple effects on global markets, the uncertainty, the volatility. Investors get spooked. Businesses, hold back on investments and economic growth slows down.
Right.
And it's not even just about the, the dollars and cents either.
Yeah.
When countries start weaponizing tariffs, it erodes trust and makes it, incredibly difficult to cooperate on other crucial issues like climate change or global security.
So we're talking about potential damage that goes way beyond just the economy.
Absolutely.
It could impact global stability and cooperation on a much larger scale.
Exactly. And it's particularly worrisome, in today's world where we're already facing so many, complex challenges that require international collaboration.
Right.
Fragmentation and isolationism just aren't the answer.
It seems like, Trump's approach is almost a throwback to a time when, countries were more insular and less interconnected.
Right.
But in today's globalized world where, supply chains and crisscross continents and economies are all intertwined, that kind of thinking seems outdated.
Yeah, it definitely goes against the grain of, how global trade has evolved over the past few decades, and it raises a lot of questions about the future, direction of the U.S. in the global arena. Is this a temporary blip, or are we witnessing a more fundamental shift towards protectionism and isolationism?
Yeah, that's a question that's on a lot of people's minds right now. But before we get too lost in the hypothetical, let's bring it back down to earth. If these tariffs do go into effect, what does it mean for the average person on the street? We talked about the impact on consumers, but, how about the impact on specific industries?
Well, let's take agriculture as an example. Imagine American farmers who rely on, exporting their crops to Mexico or Canada.
Okay.
Those retaliatory tariffs we talked about earlier, those could make their products unaffordable in those markets, essentially shutting them out. And on the flip side, American industries that depend on imported raw materials or components from those countries, they could face higher production costs, leading to either higher prices for consumers or job losses.
So it's this web of interconnected consequences that could really touch every aspect of our lives.
Exactly. And that's why it's so crucial to understand that potential domino effect of these policies. It's not just about avocados and piglets, it's about the livelihoods of millions of people and the stability of entire industries.
Welcome back to the Fast Times News Deep Dive.
Mm.
So we've journeyed through the potential impact of Trump's tariffs. We've explored historical precedents. We even peeked into that possible global fallout. So now let's synthesize what we've learned and try to make sense of where this could all lead.
Yeah, it's been a whirlwind of information, hasn't it? We've covered everything from the economic nitty-gritty to those, geopolitical power plays. And it's clear that there's no, easy answer when it comes to predicting what's going to happen.
Definitely not. But if there's one thing that really stands out to me, it's that tariffs are a total double-edged sword.
Oh, yeah.
They might seem like a simple solution,
Yeah.
but history has shown us time and time again that they often create more problems than they actually solve.
Yeah, and those ripple effects can be far-reaching. We talked about the impact on consumers and businesses, but let's not forget about the potential damage to international relationships. Trust is a fragile thing in global diplomacy.
Yeah.
And using tariffs as a weapon can easily just shatter that trust. It could lead to a world where countries, they turn inward. They just focus on protecting their own interests at the expense of global cooperation.
That's a scary thought, especially when you consider all the global challenges that we're facing right now
Yeah.
that really require, collective action,
Right.
like climate change pandemics.
Exactly. These are issues that transcend borders, and we need a, strong global framework to actually address them.
Yeah.
But if countries just retreat into their own little silos, it becomes, much harder, if not impossible, to really tackle these challenges effectively.
So it's not even just about the, economic bottom line. We're talking about the potential unraveling of the global order as we know it.
It's a sobering thought for sure, but it's important to, acknowledge those potential consequences. And it really underscores the need for, thoughtful and nuanced policymaking in our globalized world.
Okay, so where do we go from here? What are the key questions that we need to be asking ourselves as we navigate this uncertain terrain?
Well, one really crucial question is, what is Trump's endgame? Is he truly committed to these tariffs, or is this just a negotiating tactic? Is he trying to renegotiate trade deals? Is he trying to reshape the global economy? Or is he simply trying to appeal to, a specific segment of his base? Understanding his motivations is going to be really key to, predicting the future course of action.
Right. And another important question is, what role will Congress play?
Yeah.
They have the power to check the president's authority on trade, but will they be willing to exercise that power, especially if it means, going against the will of the executive branch?
Those are all really valid questions. And, unfortunately, we just don't have the answers yet.
Yeah.
But one thing's for sure, the situation is dynamic, and it requires us to, stay informed, stay engaged, and be ready to adapt to whatever comes next.
And that's where the Fast Times News comes in. We'll continue to track this story closely and provide you with the insights and analysis you need to really make sense of it all. So make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any updates.
Yeah, we'll continue to explore the complexities of this issue and, provide a platform for diverse perspectives. But ultimately, the future of global trade really rests on the decisions made by our leaders and the engagement of citizens.
So stay informed, stay engaged, stay curious, and most importantly, don't be afraid to, ask those tough questions and challenge assumptions.
Yeah, because in a world where information is power, critical thinking is our most valuable tool.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of tariffs and global trade. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the stories that matter.
Until then, stay curious, stay informed, stay engaged.
And don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the Fast Times News for even more deep dives into the news that shapes our world.